come on upstairs to Vinyl Index. We're gonna get this party started right now. MF Doom, you heard? MF Doom. Come on up. We're gonna be chopping it up. This is Skiz Fernando. I got my man Brian Coleman in the house, Dart Adams in the house, up at Vinyl Index. Got the new book, The Chronicles of Doom, Unraveling Rap's Masked Iconoclast. Yo, what's up, B?
Skiz, what's up? I want to make it clear, MF Doom is not here except in spirit. He is most certainly here in spirit. I guarantee that. Floating about. Should we just get rocking?
Let's do it.
All right. So thanks everyone who's here, and people are going to come, I'm sure, even more. My name is Brian Coleman, and it's great to be here. Appreciate Vinyl Index hosting us here. Skiz has a very, very important new book out about the legend MF Doom. We're going to talk about that. It spans his entire life, and all in full Technicolor. And so we're going to kind of get into that, about the journey of Skiz both doing the book and kind of what it meant to him and what's in the book. So Skiz has history in town, so why don't you talk a little bit about that first, and I'll keep going with your bio, but.
Okay. Respect. Yeah, Boston, it's real good to be back in town. I spent my formative years here. Shit, in Cambridge. WHRB 95.3, shout out to the dub frequency, shout out to Street Beat. Yeah, Brian, I went to college out here, was part of the radio station, was one of the early writers for the Source magazine, which was started by two classmates of mine, John Schechter and Dave Mays. Started out of their dorm room at Harvard, and now it's like a international multi-million-dollar glossy magazine covering hip-hop. Just like hip-hop has conquered the world right now. So back in the day, there was some underground shit going on. There were a few heads really following it. I was lucky to be one of those people. And, lived in New York throughout the 90s, covering hip-hop for The Source, a bunch of other magazines. Eventually went on to write a few books. I wrote The New Beats, exploring the music, culture, and attitudes of hip-hop. Came out in '94, one of the first books on hip-hop, to treat hip-hop as a serious art form and culture.
30-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Congrats on the 30 years. That's not a small thing, man. Woo. This is an incredible book. If you guys don't know, you should definitely be on the lookout for it. New Beats. So yeah, you were here, but not for too long, but long enough that it shaped a lot of what you became. I guess let's not get into it too much, but tell me about, so you started with The Source, in like 92? Which wasn't the beginning, but it was still at its infancy in a lot of ways. It was still becoming a national thing. What was that like? What was that the excitement of that? Because people will look back on The Source and know it more as a behemoth,
right,
as a publishing thing, but it wasn't back then.
Yeah, well, when it first started, it was just like a couple mimeograph pages stapled together. The fellas started out of the dorm room. Then we all graduated in '90. They ended up opening some offices on Broadway. I went to journalism school at Columbia, so I was still in contact with the brothers. And as I was telling Dart, I used to, because I was heavily into reggae at the time, I used to cover a lot of the reggae coverage of The Source, a lot of dance hall, because that was kind of blowing up in New York. The whole crossover, hip-hop, reggae crossover thing was big. And yeah, it was a very small crew of people who were covering hip-hop and writing about it, because we loved it. It's like, I personally, hip-hop raised me. I grew up on hip-hop, from the age of 10 years old, first hearing Rapper's Delight, to getting into all those breaking movies and popping and locking and all that stuff. And you know, write my tag all over shit. And, you know, so I was a hip hop kid, Gen X kid like yourself, you know, very, very influenced and inspired by the whole culture. And we just did it out of the love, you know, and now we never expected it to be what it is today, right? I mean, did you?
No, I can't say that, but I mean, I wasn't on the inside back that early, so, you know, it must have been kind of exciting to have national reach, but not, you know, feel like it was like every week was still exciting. There was always something new coming out, and you were getting your head messed up every week, which, you know, as we got later and later into hip-hop's life cycle, it happens, but not like that. Not like it was in the golden era. So, like, you know, you could talk to that more than I can. I was just a fan. You were in the machine, dude.
Well, I'll put it like this. To me, those days, what you call the golden era, everyone has a different kind of definition of golden era. I kind of define it from like 86 to 97. And that covers my high school and college years. So that's like, especially, you know, at that age, you live and die for music. And as you said, like every group that was coming out was just blowing your brains, because everyone was so different. No one was trying to be like the next man. Everyone was pushing the art form further and further out. And really, to me, the golden era is about creativity, originality, and innovation. Those three things are something that all artists had in common back then. And it would, you know, the artists were really approachable. I mean, we were like the same age as these guys, you know, and it's like we were contemporaries, and it was just a beautiful thing to see these young brothers totally making this new art from scratch, no pun intended. Or pun intended, actually, because you know, they did stuff you're not supposed to be doing on turntables, and you know, it just grew and grew and grew, and the major labels got into it, turned it into a whole different thing. But yeah, it was a special time to be around then, and let me tell you, Boston was hitting back then, because as Dart said on a radio show we were on together, I think we were on. Was it BRS?
WBR.
BUR. Yeah, because Boston is such a college town and has such a tight network of college radio, you were hearing incredible stuff on the radio back then. You know, it's just like they were really breaking a lot of records, and it was just an incredible time. That's all.
Agreed. So, like, the one thing we're going to talk about the book in a sec. The other thing that, you know, I want to point out about Skiz, that doesn't, like, even on the book flap, it doesn't say anything. So he ran one of my favorite labels of the 90s called Word Sound Records, which was, I mean, what, like 125 releases? Like,
Man, not that much. Like,
I mean, it's something, it was a lot. I mean, including singles, different editions. Incredible label, including very lesser known people, Prince Paul, Jungle Brothers. I have the Black Hoods with me right here.
Wow, that's worth something, man.
That was like a sub label. But anyway, so part of the reason I think that the Doom book has such an interesting perspective is that you understood, you know, the artistic process. You understood the mechanics of putting out records, distributing records. So some of the things that Doom did might, from the outside, have looked flaky or kind of irresponsible or bold or whatever, kind of probably made more sense to you, I would think. One of the, I don't know, does anyone here remember Sensational?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Sensational, you know, I think was, in a way, you're a Doomish type of figure in your universe. Would you agree with that?
For sure.
So I guess talk a little bit about that. We're going to get into the book in a sec and talk obviously about Doom, but how did that kind of color your looking at Doom's life as an artist and a person? Because you saw a lot of that on the inside with a different crew of characters. So it wasn't Monster Island, you know, it was the word sound weirdos, you know, and also too, Skiz is a really dope producer under Spectre and like a bunch of different aliases too. So you understand it from a production perspective too. Not a small thing. I can't claim either of those things, and I think it really leans in extra with your writing and your perspective.
Well, thank you for that, Brian. I will say this, that's probably one reason that I decided to do this Doom book. Because to me, you know, Doom released so many records on independent labels. I know all the people who put out his records. So that was an entry point into doing the research on this book. But to me, Doom was like the underground champ, man. Like, there's no other artist that I can say that made such an impact coming on independent labels. Because you gotta think that there's not a lot of promotional budget available. You know, so when you're taking the independent route, it's pretty much all on talent, you know. And this man, Daniel Dumoulin, man, he had talent in spades, and it was just incredible to see his rise, because he came in at a time that the underground was very strong. In the late 90s, coming into the early 2000s, there was actually a big rift in hip hop. There was the mainstream industry, and then there was underground. And at a certain point, underground cats were like, nah, we don't want to get on a major label. We want to control our art, control our creativity, release records independently, and show that we can still make an impact. And Doom was pretty much leading the charge on that end. So, as you said, I did play both sides. I played all sides of the industry. I was writing about music for major magazines. I was creating music as Spectre the Ill Saint. Probably some of the first instrumental hip-hop, I gotta say, even before DJ Shadow. My first Spectre album came out in like 94. It was all instrumental beats. But it was not just beats, because it was meant to be instrumental. There's like a lot of weird spoken word snippets and all that type of shit in there. So I totally understood where Doom was coming from, because like the first album, Operation Doomsday, half of it is skits, right? And he's really at that point, he's giving you the backstory of the character, Dr. Doom. You know, Doom was very influenced by the whole Marvel universe, obviously, by cartoons. But he just went a lot deeper than most people, because, like, you know, a lot of rappers have aliases. You know, Method Man's Johnny Blaze. You know, you got David Banner in the South. People, you know, hip hop and comics are like this. They go together like this. So people have always, like, you know, kind of taken names and concepts from comics, but Doom took it to the nth degree, because if you look at the origin story of Dr. Doom, who is the villain to the Fantastic Four, there's so many parallels between Dr. Doom's life and Daniel Dumoulin's life, and I kind of lay that out in the book, you know. And one of the skillful things that Doom does is he messes with the dichotomy between hero and villain. You know, it's like in the Marvel universe, the villains are not always bad, you know, and the heroes are not always good. Like, what makes Dr. Doom a bad guy? It's because he's against the Fantastic Four. But the thing is, when Dr. Doom takes over the world, what's one of the first things he does? He abolishes apartheid in South Africa. So how bad can he be, right? So it's like, Doom played with that gray area, and he represented himself as the super villain. You know, so when he announces that, yo, I'm the super villain, anything goes, you know. If he's gonna put the mask on someone else and send him out on stage, you know, expect that, and be happy that you at least got to hear the music, because Doom was a dastardly dude, and he did like dastardly deeds, you know. What do you expect from the villain?
Well, I mean, I think also part of it, I'm sure you would agree, is that it wasn't just a passing thing, or on this album I'll act like this guy and then I'll just be my regular self and this and that. I mean, you could draw a parallel to maybe like Sun Ra and how he committed to it for life. He wasn't just from Saturn for that one year.
Right.
He was always from Saturn, and like until he died. And Doom was always Doom. Obviously, we'll talk also about the transition from Zev to Doom too, which is very important. And part, you know, you say indie artists wanted to have control. Doom had more reason to want that than most because of what happened with Elektra and Black Bastards. Clearly, so there are multiple levels of that, which we're going to get into 100%. Just why don't you talk a little bit about the book, the Doom book? How did it start? How did it become just an idea, and then all of a sudden it was something that you knew had to be done, and that you knew you were the right dude to do it?
Well, I heard about Doom's passing just like all of you on New Year's Eve 2020. And I was shocked as hell because this guy's younger than me. He had a whole freaking career ahead of him. And like we were robbed, you know, it's like robbed of a real true talent, a once in a generational talent, I believe. And as I listened to the podcasts that were coming out in January, and you know, Search did a really good podcast. I think the New York Times did a podcast. And I'm hearing about Doom's life again. I'm like, wow, this guy really led an incredible life. And he was, you know, as you said, he experienced fame early on as a teenager, not even out of high school, getting a major deal with Elektra, only to be, you know, to be dropped from the label due to controversial cover art. And like 8 months previous to that, he lost his partner, Subrock, his brother. He was like his twin brother. So this is a guy who went through, you know, tremendous trials and tribulations, but he persevered, and he went back in the underground, reinvented himself, and came back bigger and better before. And if that's not the real life story of a superhero, I don't know what is, you know. So basically, that's when the idea for the book came out. When I heard about his death, I was like, if anyone deserves a book, it's Doom. I had just finished writing From the Streets of Shaolin, the Wu-Tang Saga, and that was a group that I spent a lot of time with. I knew all of the dudes in the group. I spent a lot of time. I probably have about 20 years of research in that book. For the Doom book, I never even met the guy. You know, even though we were in the same circles, we never crossed paths. I never knew him personally. As I said, I knew a lot of people that he worked with just from being an independent label circuit. So that really gave me the confidence to do the book, because I'm like, who am I going to talk to for this book? You know, because Doom's obviously not around. So the book is like 50% open source research, you know, stuff I pulled from the internet, and Doom does have interviews out there, and then like 50% of just interviews, just straight up old school journalism, hitting the streets, you know, calling people up, talking to people, wearing people out, you know, like, and somehow I managed to speak to 50 people. I don't know how I did it, because there was a lot of opposition doing this book, okay? I'm not going to say it was easy, because as you know, Doom is a very private person. He's got a very small inner circle. Those people are very protective of him, okay? And just as Doom is private, they didn't want to talk either. Some of them I was able to convince to talk, because I'm like, listen, man, people need to know about Doom. People are hungry to know about this guy. Come on, man, help me out here. So it's like, I really had to wear people out, you know? And luckily I was able to get some really good interviews. Probably one of the best was with his brother Dimbaza, who was the sibling under Subrock, and you know, it was a whole trip doing this book. But like Doom, I persevered. I got it done, and I'm pretty happy with the final product. It's called Unraveling Rap's Masked Iconoclast, which means, to me, that means Doom has a very complex story. It's not easy to tell this story. So I'm kind of peeling layers away to expose the story of Doom. I'm not trying to go behind the mask, man. I can't. No one is going to know Daniel Dumoulin like his wife or his like closest people. And until they write a book, we're not going to know about the man behind the mask. I just basically put his story together, you know, put it in a narrative form, gave him some context, because Doom didn't exist in a vacuum. You know, to me, he's fighting against the mainstream music industry, which is what I've been doing all my life. So he's an underground champ, you know.
I mean, the thing about the book, and you know, if some of you have probably read it up to this point, but if not, you should definitely check it out. Is the thing I liked about it? It's comprehensive, but like you said, there's certain things that you couldn't get to, and you don't kind of linger about it. There's enough to talk about, but it's not in any way, doesn't make it a complete kind of telling of this guy who was a complicated person, ridiculously creative person, sometimes difficult to deal with, sometimes best friends with everybody. But it doesn't look at any of the more potentially sensationalistic things about his life in that kind of a way. It's all very even keeled, and it tells a pretty amazing story of an amazing person. I mean, what do you think to this day, even after the book, is the most misunderstood thing about Doom? Whether from his early years, whether from his later years, like, do you think there's still things that people don't quite understand or they get wrong that you want to talk about?
Well, you know, one big thing that I didn't find out about that a lot of people who were close to him told me, especially like his brother DeBaza, was that Doom, especially towards the end of his career, he was more interested in like esoteric knowledge and what I like to call the occult. And the occult does not mean black magic, it just means hidden knowledge, okay? Doom was into all these things. He was into, you know, quantum physics. He was into Egyptology. He was into UFOs. He was into crystals. And I wish I could have really talked to him about that stuff, because I'm into all that stuff too, you know. And like early on, Doom was in a while he was a teenager, he was in a group called Ansaru Allah Community, and they were kind of big in New York in the 70s and 80s. It was a group run by this guy called Dr. Malachi York, and they were into all of this really, for lack of a better word, strange information. You know, like one of the things that Dr. York said about himself was he basically said, "I'm a green-skinned reptilian from the planet Risk," you know. And now, a light bulb goes off. Doom, one of his characters was King Ghidorah, you know, who was the villain in the Godzilla movies, the three-headed dragon from outer space, who was Godzilla's nemesis. So I wonder where Doom got that from, you know? So it's like, there's a whole section in the book called The Myth. The book is divided into 5 sections. The man, the myth, the mask, the music, the legend. And in that myth section, I kind of explore some of Doom's influences, like Dr. York, like the Godzilla movies. Like, you know, and to me, Doom is in the continuum of African American history, like the whole concept of the trickster, the bad man, you know? Because once again, it's like the bad man is only bad because he's kind of operating on the fringes of society, but that's all he has access to, really. You know what I'm saying? So it's like Doom totally played that gray area, you know? And to really understand where he's coming from, you got to understand some of these influences. Yeah. So I go into it, you know?
I mean, the thing too that is interesting there's pretty much everything about Dr. York is interesting, some of it controversial, some of it downright kind of, you know, not good. But the other thing too is he was an R&B guy in the 80s too, like a really slick R&B guy, like a reptilian R&B dude. So that kind of also explains, like, probably a little bit too about, you know, Doom's love of that side of things, of being like slick. Ding! You know,
there you go, the R&B angle. That really irked me about Doom when I first heard him. Like,
man, I don't listen to Atlantic Star. I don't listen to SOS, man. Why you sample? I do like Sade, but like, why you sample this cheesy R&B stuff? But you know what? It grew on me. It grew on me.
Check. No,
Yeah, you good.
Yeah, so you can see it, right? Like you can see that, you can almost see the influences. So I don't really in the book, I don't really like connect point A and B, but I just tell the story, and you can make the connections in there because they're there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dr. York is what a weird character, and funny enough, you know who was another big follower of Dr. York? Jay-Z.
Yep.
From the jazz days, when Jay-Z was like the hype man to jazz, they were both like, even there's even a jazz video,
The originators.
that's filmed in the Bushwick neighborhood where the Ansar community was, and they basically took over this really crime-ridden block in Brooklyn, and it was just like they totally changed it. You know, it was like there was actually stores there and it's funny because I actually went to Dr. York's bookshop in Bushwick. Africa Bambaataa took me there because at one point I was working on a book with Bambaataa, and Bam is into he's way out there into like conspiracy stuff. So he takes me to this bookstore, and there's all these pamphlets and like Egyptology shit, and it's like, wow, that was my first experience with Dr. Doom. And you can see on the back of the Operation Doomsday cover, Doom and his brother are dressed in the white robes of the Ansars. Now, eventually, the Ansars moved down to Atlanta. Yeah, there it is, right there. Eventually, they moved down to Atlanta. This was right in the middle of when KMD was recording Black Bastards, and they were originally using York's studio in upstate New York, and I guess when the Ansars moved, they had to get a new studio because that was.
I mean, it's true though, right? I mean, you say Atlanta, but it was really rural Georgia. They bought like over 100 acres,
Eatonton,
and they were building pyramids,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
I mean, so it was, it was serious stuff. I mean, it is very interesting to me doing research on the kind of Black Bastards era and hearing stuff about Dr. York and how he kind of is woven throughout Doom's adult life.
I want you to talk about that because you did in your book.
In your book, you actually interviewed Doom in that KMD era. What was that like, talking to Doom? And
Oh, well, actually, no. I interviewed him in like 2000, 2001.
Okay.
When they were reissuing Black Bastards.
Well, what was that like?
Suburbs. It was a great conversation. I mean, he was very open about
Was it
stuff.
face to face or on
No,
the phone?
it was on the phone.
Okay.
I'm not sure even. I think he may have been in Atlanta at that point.
Yeah, he was.
So, yeah, I mean, it was at that point. Doom hadn't really achieved the kind of mythical status that he had. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, so you're back. Like, oh, let's talk about this. Because the one thing about the book that's kind of amazing to me, probably the most revelatory thing, is the Lost Years, which
Right.
was after Black Bastards was shelved by Elektra, which was all kinds of unjust for all kinds of like really stupid reasons. But basically it left, and you point this out, it left Doom, who was still what, 22, 23? I mean, and you point out he had never had a job, and now he had no occupation because he was basically going to be blacklisted now because no one else wanted the record because they're like, well, Elektra dropped you, why do we want you? So he was kind of wandering in the wilderness and trying to figure out.
He had a kid too?
Yeah, he had a kid and trying to figure things out. So anyways, I don't want to get too much into my whole thing, but I mean, I found him very honest, very appreciative that I was interviewing him at the time for XXL, which was a major magazine, and so he was appreciative that a major magazine like XXL would be interested in his story, at least as far as the KMD Black Bastards thing. But yeah, you've still, no matter what, you've done way more research than I have. So why don't you talk though about KMD and especially that year with Sub Rock passing, also under kind of mysterious circumstances, and it's still never really been established what happened to Sub Rock, which I think always lingered with him. But it wasn't a good way to die in any way, and it really messed Doom up bad, and then the dropping. But so why don't you, I guess, talk a little bit about that and those lost years and how he kind of, the mask started to form in his persona. And it was important, but I think the final thing too, I would say, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but when he first came out, it wasn't a confident Doom. He wasn't like, I'm out, I'm here, and, like, I don't care what any of you people think. I mean, he was still kind of unsure of himself. He didn't know if anyone still wanted to hear what he had to say and hear the music he had. Is that fair to say?
Sure, yeah.
Well, first of all, consider this, like, as you said, he never had a job in his life. He's still in high school. He had a kid during making the first album, Mr. Hood. He's like 22, 23. He loses his brother, who's like his A-alike, his partner, and I think if that had not happened, we would not even be talking about MF Doom, because I think KMD was on a trajectory to have a really good career. To me, they were like the next incarnation of the Native Tongues. They were just a whole different, like, quirky, fun hip-hop. It was like, so the missing years, in a lot of the interviews, he said he was homeless. He wasn't really homeless. He did have a place to live. He was living at his father's house most of the time. Well, first of all, when he initially got dropped from the label, he got a severance from Elektra, maybe something like $25,000. He rented an apartment in Manhattan, and he still had his basic equipment. He was still making beats and everything, but he was just doing a lot of drugs, pretty much psychedelics. Back in that time, there was area in Central Park in New York where you could easily get acid, mescaline, and all this stuff. Everyone, if you were in the know, you knew where to go. And Doom was in the know, and he was pretty much just eating psychedelics like candy. And I think this is what I suspect was the reason. I think just being in that state, if you've done psychedelics, you know that you can cross the barrier between different dimensions. And I think Doom was maybe trying to communicate with his brother, through that means. So yeah, it was a very difficult time, and you can't even imagine what it's like to have achieved success early on as a youth and be totally unprepared for it. And then all of a sudden, the rug is pulled out from under you, and like, what the fuck are you gonna do for the rest of your life, So this was a huge move the comeback was a huge move. He just basically stuck to his guns. Music was his salvation, it's his art. That's what I love about it. It's like, it's this guy, it's like Rocky, it's like Rocky, like boxing was his salvation. It's like for Doom, music was his salvation. He poured his entire being into it, and it wasn't like he suddenly exploded. It was a gradual climb up, First he releases 3 or 4 singles on Bobito's independent label, Fondle 'Em. White label, not even any artwork, Created a little buzz in the underground. I know how tough that is, trying to do it myself. It's like virtually impossible. But one thing Doom had going for him was that he signed to Subverse. They had a little money behind it. They had a really good publicist, Fiona Bloom, and she just thrust him out there. All the mainstream magazines were covering Doom, the Village Voice, the Times. To me, that really helped.
Yeah.
Because obviously there was interest because he was formerly of KMD on a major label. So it was not an easy climb back up, but he did it step by step, slowly building the confidence. I talk about the first show he did at the New Eureka Poets Cafe in New York, which was like an underground venue, kind of all the new talent bubbling up would come through there. And Doom didn't even have the mask at that time, but he knew he wasn't showing his face, so he had a stocking cap pulled over his face. And there's maybe like 50 people in the room, and he does his thing, and like from the Fondle, because Bobito was also on the radio, so he was playing the Fondle single all through New York, and like crowd knew all the lyrics and shit. So Doom is slowly getting confidence, and I think when Operation Doomsday was re-released on Subverse, and then slowly, soon after followed by Black Bastard, it was like a double punch, and that really pushed him back into the limelight.
So I think we, with the confidence, one of the most visible and obvious things to talk about with Doom was the mask.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you talk a little bit about, because you've heard from a lot of different people about it. Blake Keogh, obviously made the mask, but it was different at first. I thought the story was kind of amazing how the original one, somebody at a video shoot sat on it, and then it's like, that was a big thing, because that was kind of, is it fair to say it was at first at least a crutch in a certain way, that it would give him the anonymity, it would give him a little bit. So talk about that. Talk about why you think it came about and why he stuck with it, because he didn't have to stick with it. At some point he could have said, oh yeah, the mask thing, that was just a phase.
Well, I found out, even from like Doom's high school friends, I found out that even as a kid growing up, he was just a very low-key individual. Like, people used to hang out at his house in Long Beach, because his brother used to give haircuts to all the neighborhood kids. And Doom would always just be laying back in the cut, just like reading a book, or didn't really say much. So he was always a very low-key individual. And I can totally understand that also being a Cancer, we don't like a lot of attention, and we're kind of low-key. So it's like, when Doom experienced fame, he probably wasn't ready for it. And he was like, he didn't like it. He said, like, fame in the streets is something that you don't want. It's like, so during these missing years, when he was kind of plotting and scheming his comeback, he said, if I ever come back, I'm going to wear a mask so people don't see my face, so I can enjoy a private life too. Yeah. Having a personal life, having a private life was very important to him. He's not like other rappers. He's not like a dude who's like dying for attention. He's not like this egotistical dude who's like, I'm the man, it's all about me. That's why he rapped in the third person, He never said I, he was like he did this, he did that, he did that. So it's like already he's taking a very different approach, because he never represented himself as an MC or a rapper. He said, I'm a writer. I write for different characters,
Well, but to be fair, Zev did. At least more. So that's kind of the dichotomy of it.
Well, Zev was a character too.
True.
Zev was a character too.
But he showed his face, and it was more like, hey, I'm Zev.
But that was his first incarnation, right?
Sure, every rapper has a stage name.
But the mask was very important to him, because he wanted to create that anonymity. He wanted to create that mystique. That was actually the reason he did it. He was like, this was a plan. He told many people. He told Prince Paul. He told Del the Funky Homo Sapien. When I come back to Matt, people are like, Paul was like, that's crazy, man. No one's gonna like, who does that? It's like, who wears masks besides like Mexican wrestlers? It's like, or superheroes. So
yeah,
that was definitely a very calculated move on his part. And as we see, it was a very successful move, because it did create this mystique, and at a certain point, the mask became his identity. Like, so now he can say, oh, okay, I don't feel like doing this show. Here, Brian, you take the mask and you beat Doom tonight. And there's so many people who told me, like,
they would go to a Doom show and see this guy on the mask on stage, and then someone would tap them on the shoulder, and it would be Doom, and the audience like, and it's like, and like one of the first people he told he was going to do that was Prince Paul, and Paul was like, "Dude, you bugging, man, you bugging," like, and he was like, "Yeah, Paul, I'm going to do it," and then I get Paul's reaction in the book, and like Paul was like proud of it. He was like, "Man, you pulled it off, and it didn't hurt you at all, because now people are coming to your shows just to see if it's really you." So,
okay, so you and I, Skiz and I, are going to talk more, but I want to stop now. Just we must have questions from the audience, because Doom being Doom. So who's got what? Let's ask a couple audience questions now.
Where was that first show in New York at? Like what neighborhood and stuff?
it's in the Lower East Side. It's called the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. It's still there today. Yup. And I actually talked to the guy who started that night, Rocky Montaigne, in the book. He's actually from Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The old that band.
You know him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Who else? I know we got people that want to say stuff, ask questions. No? I'm shocked. Well, we'll keep going.
We could talk for hours.
We'll keep going. Well, actually, I was trying to remember the first time he played in Boston, and the thing going back to the mask I thought was interesting. Was anyone at that show? Because I can't remember the venue. It was Downtown Crossing. It was like a bar. It was not a proper venue. Jeremy, you know? I know people were there. I was there.
It must have been, what, around 2000, 2001?
It had to have been, yeah, I'm guessing 2000. And the thing that was most remarkable about that night was you could not hear one thing he was saying because of the mask. And I was like, who the hell raps with a mask like that? I can't. It was literally, I mean, it was loud. It was not a proper club. It was not a real great sound system. But I just remember being like, this is just so weird. And it was kind of cool because of that, but it was also like logistically, like what the hell is he doing?
Was that after you interviewed him, or?
No, this, I assume this was before.
Okay, all right.
I mean, do you have other stories about how he modified it so that it would be a little bit more amenable to a live? Because I just remember he kept hitting the microphone on the you know, where the it would come at his mouth would kind of start, and I'm just like.
I'll tell you a funny story that's in the book about the mask and live performance. He did a show in Philly at this spot, and by that time he had he had a little metal attaché case for the mask. Okay, so he's doing this show in Philly, and there's these people heckling him from the back. So he's got his hype man, Big Ben Klingon, who's a former football player, and Doom says, "Stop the music." And he says, "Ben, get him!" And this is like something out of a comic book, man. This huge dude just ambles off stage. The crowd parts like the Red Sea. And Big Ben Klingon gets the guy in a headlock and takes him outside. The guy's buddies are following. By this time, Doom's jumped off stage. He took the mask off, put it in the attaché case, and runs outside to help Ben. And by this time, Ben's got the guy in a headlock, and the dude's buddies are punching on Ben. So Doom comes up with the briefcase and just slams the guy three times in the face with this metal attaché case. And then they jump in the rental car and they disappear before security comes. This is a true story. And they actually did a song about that called Monday Night at Fluid. And it's like, the lyrics it's in the book. It came out on a Sound Inc. compilation. And Sound Inc. was the label that put out the Victor Vaughn album.
Yeah.
The first Victor Vaughn. So, there's a lot of stuff like that. You know,
There is. Do you have a person? Oh yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah, it's on this album, Monday Night at Fluid.
Yeah.
Yep.
Check the lyrics on that.
Do you have a favorite Doom record? And or do you think, and is that the same record that you would say was his most pivotal and most important? And that can even go back to KMD, but I'm guessing you will it'll be later than that.
Well, people really need to, if you haven't, people really need to revisit Black Bastards. That's a dope album, man. Like, any way you cut it, that's a dope album. You know, it's like, that can hang today. But obviously, Mad Villainy, you know, to me is like, it's almost a perfect album. You can just listen to it. Yeah, there's Black Bastards. You can listen to Mad Villainy all the way through, and it's just like, that might be one of my top 10 Desert Island classics. But I actually like some of Doom's later albums, like Key to the Cuffs and Born Like This, which you might be surprising. But Doom was fucking with some really crazy beats on those albums. You know, the J.J. Doom was produced by Gennaro Jarrell, who's an American producer, and he has a lot of kind of avant-garde type of productions. And I also love the story behind Key to the Cuffs, that title, which I won't divulge now, it's in the book. But also Born Like This, I think, is his most personal album. Like, most of the time, Doom doesn't divulge any personal information about himself. He'll talk about his brother, or he might talk about the time that he got arrested in Baltimore, and he was like writing lyrics on the top of his bunk bed. And if you want to see Get Arrested, and go check out The Cell, and you'll see his lyrics. But I think one thing I appreciate about Doom is he never kind of rested on his laurels. Like he even says in the book, like, people were expecting me to do like Mad Villainy for the rest of my career, you know, and I'm ours, I got to grow. So he's like one of the few people who's constantly growing and evolving, picking different beats, you know, rapping in different styles. That Batman song where he raps really fast, he's actually really rapping that fast. And it's like, you know, usually Doom is like a slow conversational style. So he was like really pushing himself, picking like, you know, really kind of weird beats and stuff like that. And, you know, who knows where he could have taken it, you know? It's like, so that's one thing that I really appreciate about him.
Why don't you talk a little bit about, I mean, because I think one of the things about Doom, even from the beginning of as Doom, and even going back further with GYP and things like that, he was a crew guy. He always liked to surround himself with people. He liked to put people on. I'm not sure, like, a lot of the people he tried to put on stayed on, but his whole thing was very much, and obviously Word Sound, there are parallels too. You guys had a pretty amazing crew. Talk a little bit about that aspect of bringing people along with you and sharing the spotlight, because clearly you could have done solo all the way or done a little guest spot here and there, but his thing was very much bringing people, especially, you know, more, I think personally, without ever asking him, I think that he felt that especially artists who probably didn't have as much of a chance, certainly with a major label or even with a big indie, that like, I'm going to put them on because I see something in them and I want to give them a shot and maybe it takes off.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you brought up, because one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know about Doom is initially he wanted to have a crew like Wu-Tang called Monster Island Czars, okay? And the whole concept of it was everyone takes the name of a different monster from the Godzilla movies. So Doom was King Ghidorah, who was Godzilla's nemesis. His partner, MF Grimm, was Jet Jaguar. And you know, you think that maybe there's like one or two Godzilla movies? Oh, you got the Monster Island? Oh, wow. And the King Ghidorah. You know, you think that Godzilla was one of the like one or two movies. It's one of the biggest film franchises in the history of film. There are different eras of Godzilla, and there's so many different monsters. You know, you think you know like Mothra and Rodan and Megalon, but there's a lot of different monsters. So the whole Doom. Here's another thing. Doom was really influenced by Wu-Tang. I mean, who wasn't coming up in the 90s in New York? You know, Wu-Tang cast a huge shadow.
And it was the whole idea of coming in with a crew, you know, because initially RZA and Jizza had solo deals, and then they got dropped, and they said, "Fuck this, we're gonna come back with our crew. We're gonna go back to the streets, come back with." And Doom did the same thing, but you know, his initial partner was Grim, and shout out to Papa D and Brick Records from Boston for putting out the first MF EP. Split side, 3 songs by Grim.
No mask
Oh
on.
my God, this is
No mask on the cover. No mask on the cover.
no mask.
Yep.
No mask.
Mr. Jason remix on there.
Yeah.
And Papa D tells the story.
No mask, though. Yeah.
Yep.
Go.
Papa D tells a story in here of putting that together and how even on this photo shoot.
He wanted to have his head down.
Yeah. He said, "Oh, you can't use those pictures. My face is visible." You know.
Yeah.
And Doom had his 7-year-old son on the photo shoot too, and they you know. So it was like a family affair. But getting back to the Monster Island thing, that was really one of his main focuses. Like he did not want to come back necessarily alone.
Yeah.
He wanted to do the group first, like Wu-Tang, and then break off on solo albums. So that Monster Island album is really kind of slept on. Doom only did like 4 cuts. The majority of the album was produced by this guy, Web D, Ray Davis, who was X-Ray, X-Ray the Mindbender, who was also in a group at the time signed to Loud.
Dark Mind.
Dark Mind, there we go. Some very good trivia here.
So good.
But but that whole MFEP, you know, came through Brick. So, you know, shout out to Boston for making that happen. And I think basically why Monster Island didn't take off was just the logistics of, you know, keeping like 8 dudes on the same page. I mean, with Wu-Tang, it's hard enough. Those guys were all related, like they were brothers, cousins, and they all grew up together. The Monster Island was a little more, you know, just MCs they knew, but that was the concept.
Yeah, but with Wu-Tang too, there's also money to be had and spread around, whereas Monster Island was never going to be that big. I mean, or is that fair to say? I personally always got the sense that it was never supposed to be something that was going to take over the world or even the industry. That it was, this is my crew, I believe in these guys. I'm sure some of these guys let me crash on their couch in the lost years and I owe them or I want to help them. So I think that was part of his personality was that. RZA was, artistically, yes, but he was also trying to make everybody a lot of money, which I never got the sense that was Doom's main focus. Fair? As someone who's done Wu-Tang books and Doom books.
You were very correct in that. In fact, Doom kind of fucked over the rest of the guys, Monster Island. When it came down to it, he kept most of the advance. But the record did come out on Rhyme Sayers, and what more can you ask for? Because like these guys weren't going to try to get a deal themselves, so it's like he at least put them on and got them recognized, and people still know Megalon, Tommy Gunn. People still know Rodan. So some of those guys made a splash. It's a question of talent too, because like when you're talking about Wu-Tang, you're talking about elite level MCs. These guys are like,
Well,
I always felt this.
it wasn't a done. It wasn't like at the beginning.
At the beginning, yeah,
it wasn't like, these guys are gonna take over. I mean, I always thought personally, doing some Wu-Tang stuff myself, research-wise, journalism-wise, the biggest thing that RZA will ever deserve credit for, among many things, is convincing every single one of those MCs to look. We're not gonna make shit on this first album. There's too many of us, but if you follow me, you guys are all gonna become incredibly rich. And you're telling this to starving dudes, guys who have nothing. Just the leadership and the confidence to do that is almost unmatched. I've never heard of anything like that. And everything he said came true. It worked.
I think the breakdown really happened because it was supposed to be between Grim and Doom. They were supposed to be the RZA and Jizza of the crew.
Yeah, exactly.
And what ended up happening was the vision was actually Grimm's. And when Grimm got locked up, he's left holding the bag. And Doom was just like, well, I can do as much as I can for these dudes, but ultimately they don't have the drive, they don't have the personality, and not all of them have the talent.
Right.
So I'm out here hustling, trying to get these deals. I can't drag everybody along.
Yeah.
And ultimately is when, Grimm got back in there and had Day by Day Entertainment, that he kind of pushed things forth, and then, they had their rift, So
Very
I
good
think that
point,
was a big
Dart.
issue.
Very good point. Yeah, it was a different situation from Wu-Tang, but we'll just leave it at that. But yeah, Grimm, I tried to interview Grimm. He was like, "Where'd you get my number from?" It's not like I know like 10 people. We have 10 people in common, but anyway, Grimm was a little bit suspicious. They had between Grimm and Doom, they had their issues too. There was money exchange. I didn't really get into that because obviously Grimm didn't talk to me, and I'm not talking to Doom. But yeah, there was a little funny business there. It's always funny when it comes to the money. It's just like, and that's really what takes out a lot of groups, So I think at a certain point, Doom was like, "All right, guys, I did my best.
Yeah.
You guys are on your own."
Yeah. Like I said, I always thought that it was not like I'm gonna make you rich, I'm gonna do everything for you, I'm gonna solve all your problems, but
But it was more
I want to put
community.
you on.
like, yeah.
I want to give you a shot, and let's see what happens. It wasn't, I promise you,
Right.
you're gonna be huge. It
Right.
was like, here you go. Here's the mic. Go. Do we have any questions from the audience now?
Was Madlib receptive to being interviewed, or was he kind of a
No,
little distant?
not at all. Madlib, negative. He doesn't do any interviews. I mean, have you interviewed him? I have a friend, Pete Agustin, who interviewed him, spent a whole day with him, and you know what he told me? He was like, "I don't think Madlib is very articulate. That's why he doesn't want to do interviews. Because I spent a whole day with the dude, and he was like, oh yeah, that's dope. I mean, he was high, of course, the whole day, but
Yeah.
he's like one of these guys. He's into what he does. He doesn't want to talk about it. I can totally dig that. It's like I wrote the book. Like I shouldn't have to talk. I love to talk. That's the problem. But it's all in the book.
Anyone else? Because we're gonna go back one more time for audience. But so think about something. You got Skiz right here. Go ahead.
Does the book go into any detail about some of the later releases that kind of happened in Doom's life, some of the one-off singles, like the Lunch Break with Flying Lotus and Thundercat and stuff like that? That's just end of life things that happened and came out post one.
Yeah, I mentioned it. I didn't really get into the singles that much because also that's, I basically covered all his albums up to Neruvian Doom and Czarface. Obviously, Czarface was the last project he did, and actually, Esoteric, it's the last word in the book because he was really the last person to work with Doom, and even though they did it remotely, he's the last person to have that experience. And also, Lamore Supreme, the artist who did the cover, was telling me some stuff about Doom, and Doom was was really encouraging other artists, and he was like that dude, he was like that OG dude who would always encourage other people to do stuff, even when he's at his lowest point, because he lost his son in 2017. I think Malachi was 14. Yeah. And god damn, imagine that, man. It's I lost a nephew who was 17, and that's something my brother's never gonna live down. And I could totally see Doom, after losing his brother and then losing his son. I don't know how you continue to make music even after that.
All right. So one thing I wrote down one line from the book that I thought was very interesting, insightful, and so let's expand upon it. Towards the very end, you say that Doom had a knack for selling himself without selling out. So how would you kind of elaborate on that? Because it's true and it makes sense. And it can be a fine line, because you also mentioned he was doing NFTs and stuff that sellouts do. So, but how is he doing it in a way that he did maintain his integrity?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's a fine line that you have to tread. You know, I mean, Doom had the sneaker deals. He had the Nike SB Dunks. Only the second rap artist to get. De La was the first to get those. I think since then Madlib has gotten it. Doom had a deal with Clark's before Wu-Tang. How do you figure? Like, Wu-Tang is like the, Ghost is like the Wally champ. How did Doom get a Clark's deal? It's like these are all people coming to him. So after a certain point, it's like all these brands wanted to cash in on the underground cachet of Doom, because he was still an underground artist. He was not on a major label, even like later in life. He did sign a nice juicy deal with Lex, 6-figure deal, but he was still kind of in this underground level, and by that time he had created such a mystique that people were coming up to him, like, and I kind of go through some of the weirder marketing opportunities he got, and he turned down a lot of stuff too. Like, he could have made a lot more money, but thankfully he did stuff like the NFTs. He was probably one of the few hip-hop artists to mess with that. And the reason Doom is doing all this stuff is Doom is a family man. He had 5 kids, 2 sons, 3 daughters. 2 of the daughters are special needs kids, and he really cared about his family. He wanted to take care of his family, and I think he knew that the time was short. I think he really knew, because several people that I interviewed, including his brother, said, Doom told me at some point people are going to be asking questions about him, and I want you to put this out there. I want you to tell people about this. So Doom knew that his time was coming short. He had health problems for a long time, but he was so dedicated to taking care of his family that he made these deals happen. Now, obviously, Jasmine had a lot to do with that too, because not only was she his partner in life, she was his business partner, and I think, like, without her, Doom would have been in a whole nother state, because, like, they were a team, and they were definitely on the same page, and they made shit happen together. And I don't want to like, spoiler alert, but there's like what was the company? There's a company that built Doom like a special speaker.
Oh yeah.
I'm blank. Was it Puma or something like that? Like out of a shoe. And it's like it was just for him.
Yeah.
It was like a custom-made shoe speaker. Like, who else gets these things? Like, oh, Doom, we want to make you a shoe speaker. Oh, great! Like, and they tricked it out and everything like that. So but I think he could have taken, like, I talked to one of the guys from Lex in England, and, like, he turned down a lot of stuff too. Yeah. So he was selective about what he did. Now on the Gastro site, you can buy a cereal bowl and a spoon for like $65. So more power to him, man.
All right, so I got one more question.
Yeah.
After all the work, after the book, if Doom was here in front of you, if you could get him on the phone, what do you still want to know you weren't able to ascertain that would help you kind of put the bow on everything? Is there one gnawing thing you could never figure out because you couldn't ask him direct, despite all the different angles you came at? That's what I got.
Yeah, one of the big regrets is that, I'm really
guy who does a lot of research too. I go down those YouTube rabbit holes, and I'm into the hidden knowledge. And I know Doom was a scientist. He was a wizard. You know, he was like totally into all that shit. You don't necessarily see it in his lyrics. He'll drop maybe a little reference, something like that, and it's gonna make you do some research. Like Doom is one of those MCs who he can just drop a reference. I don't know what it is. It's gonna make me pick up a book and read something. So one thing that a lot of people who were close to him said was that just this body of esoteric knowledge, you know, like for example, like Doom was really into crystals, like amethyst. Like he gave Tom Brown, the head of Lex, he got a piece of amethyst and he broke it in half, and he said, if you ever need to contact me, just put this on your head and think of me, and we will have telepathic communication. We don't need phones or anything, you know? And also I found out that behind the mask, where no one could see, Doom had tricked it out. There was like pieces of crushed amethyst.
Oh, yeah.
There was a copper spiral in the third eye. So he was really he was metaphysical knowledge, spirituality. That's what I would really love to talk to him about, because I'm into that stuff myself.
Yeah.
Like even the whole Operation Doomsday title, that came from a Sidney Sheldon book, and it was about UFOs, you know. So it's like I know Doom was into UFOs. You know, obviously he was into the psychedelic realm, you know, like the realm beyond the senses. And the only other dude that I know like that in hip hop is pretty much like RZA. You know, like RZA's like a dude who will just like eat a bag of mushrooms and trip out and just, you know, have a good conversation with him. But yeah, that's one of the things I regret. And none of us are going to really know about that unless someone who's like really close to him writes a book. But I think in the end, you get his life story. You get his influences, you get his motivations, you know, and it's a pretty incredible story. Even, you know, hip hop aside, it's a very human story of a guy who was just, you know, who just came back from the worst, and it's an inspirational thing, and it's like if Doom can do it, any one of us can do it. So that's how I see Doom in the final estimation. He was like a totally inspirational character. He was totally committed to the art. You know, the art. Hip hop now, we lose sight of the fact now that it's pop culture. We lose sight of the fact that it was an art form. It's a culture with deep roots. This is not something that you can buy and sell. This is what people live and die for. You know, it's like, I'm sure a lot of these people in the room just live and die for this music. You know, so it's like Doom was that one crusader for the real. You know, like and you got to respect that, because there's so few examples of that, especially in hip hop or otherwise.
Amen. Well put. Any other questions? I can't believe you guys don't have any questions. All these Doom people.
John Robinson at all in the book?
Who?
Little side, John Robinson.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
I had to work on Psy. Like, he was one of those people, is the estate involved in this? I said, no. So I had to explain my background and like why I'm doing the book, and eventually, you know, I was able to convince a few people like that to talk. John really sheds a lot of good light on the creative process.
Yeah, because what you were just saying made me think, we were friends with him. He used to play Boston a lot, and he would, when he did the album Who Is This Man with Doom, he would tell us little like tidbits of the process. So there's like, if you say like a wild word like stupendous, you can never say it again on the album. You can only say it one time, so that
Yes.
will retain power.
Yes.
He told us little things like that about how his creative process.
Yeah, and like Doom was like, never mention the date in your rhymes. It's going to date the thing. And also, like when John Robinson was like looking for samples, you know, just skipping through, Doom was like, "What the fuck you doing? Listen to the whole record all the way through. Play that record. Marinate with it. Smoke a blunt. You know, go
Just
cook
take
some
from it.
food,
Yeah, exactly.
and just let that music
slip into you because you're just going through it like that. You're not gonna catch the real thing, you know. So like Doom took his time with things, and it looked like he had a lot of stuff, but he admits in the book that he was lazy. You know, he just happened to stack a lot of things up in those missing years, and there was no editing floor for Doom. He used everything. And he double dipped too. He was famous for double dipping and like even selling stuff that he didn't own, like the missing notebook rhymes that came out on Adult Swim. He didn't even have the rights.
Super Flight Brothers.
Huh?
I only got into Billy Woods' first group, Super Crown Flight Brothers, because their first 12-inch single, it said one of the songs, Dirtweed, was produced by MF Doom. The beat was Hum Rush, which is one of the only 2 beats on KMZ's first album, Mr. Hood, that are not produced by MF Doom. It's Dante Ross.
Yeah.
But that's the beat that Super Crown Flight Brothers rapped over, and I've talked to Billy Woods before. I forgot to ask him about this before, but because I'm a lifelong fan of Billy Woods, but it was that MF Doom production that got me into them. But that's not his beat actually.
Yeah. So like he would have no qualms about selling that beat. But then, you know, like more power to him, because the way I look at it is the music industry is the most fucking corrupt, exploitative business to artists, and anytime an artist can get over on a corporation, fuck, more power to him, man. Like fuck all these corporations. They've ruined every fucking thing in the country. You know, it's like down to real estate, down to everything. So fuck them. You know, it's like that's why I'm always committed to the independent path. I love independent record stores, independent bookstores. We need to support these things because it's like all of the art shit is disappearing now. Like in the 90s, we had so many magazines to write for, and we could actually make a living wage, like writing about music that we loved and like sharing it. You know, it's like that's what it was all about when we were writing, right? Like I was telling you, I would never review something that I didn't like. Like, what's the point of that? I'm trying to. I'm like when I was writing, I was trying to like introduce people like new shit, like push the limit. And to me, hip hop was always about adding on, like taking it to the next. Like no one was trying to be the same, and we need to recapture that original spirit.
Yeah.
You know.
Agreed. All right, so in the spirit of that, I hope many of you will purchase the book. It is a true journey if you have any interest in Doom or independent hip hop or just artists in general. It's an incredible read.
And let me say one thing about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to put this out front because I've been very transparent with the estate. This is an unauthorized book, and what that means is the estate had nothing to do with it. Okay, it's totally legal for anyone to write a book about anyone else, and you know this was vetted by a lawyer. It's scrupulously documented. I quote a lot of other writers, including Brian. Everything is scrupulously footnoted and documented. Everything, I stand by everything in this book. Everything is corroborated, even controversial stuff like drug use. I had to talk to different people to corroborate it. I'm not going to take one guy's word that, you know, such and such was happening. So everything is scrupulously documented, footnoted. Unfortunately, I didn't have my man Dart to fact check it, but next time, because I know this man is thorough and he goes deep. So.
Perfect example. Doom's brother's name came from a 1982 Sega arcade game that became a 1983 ColecoVision game. Sub-Rock 3D and Sub-Rock. I just want to put that out there.
All right, that is not in the book. So you just got another little tidbit. But yeah, so when you do, to me, the best biographies are unauthorized because when the estate controls something. I'll give you an example. The Prince documentary on Netflix. We're never going to see that guy. Sorry. It's a 9-hour documentary. The estate was involved. They opened the vaults to all that footage, but then they got final cut, and they didn't want their boy Prince being portrayed in anything but as the god that he is. But Doom, I give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I don't pass judgment. You know.
if he was selling drugs, he's the only rapper who never bragged about selling drugs in his rhymes. So it's like, you know, if he was doing drugs, hey, dude's been through a lot of shit, you know. If he needs to self-medicate, that's on him. So I don't pass judgment. I just give you the good, the bad, and the ugly as it should be, and it's up to you to decide. I'm sensitive about that too, because you're writing about a man who's not around to defend himself. So I always put myself in that situation. How would I feel if I said this about someone? You know, if someone said this about me and I'm not around to say it. So I just want to put that out there, that even though it's unauthorized, I'm very sensitive to that stuff, and I made sure to keep a balance, and also, you know, just to provide a full, as much as I could, 3D perspective on Doom.
All right. Well, so definitely hope you purchase some stuff. Support this excellent store. I really appreciate Vinyl Index for having us here.
Yeah,
As you can see, they're stocked up. There's as much Doom stuff here as you could possibly ever want.
coming too.
Come up, say hello to Skiz, buy a book. Just come and say hello anyways. And yeah, have an amazing weekend, everybody. Give this man a hand.
Thank you to Brian, too. I've known this man for 35 years. This is the first time we met in person. Can you believe it? This man is like, to me, I worship this man. He's an OG hip-hop scribe, and his books are some of the deepest, most well-researched books that are out there. So, like,
Appreciate it, man.
give thanks, man. Give thanks.
And he writes his notes by hand.
That's true. I don't do on cassette anymore. Digital interviews.